What famous person did horrible things that people largely forgot about? Salvador Dalí found a thrill in torturing and killing living things, both animals and humans. He tried to kill his sister and one of his lovers. He tortured and killed animals. George Orwell wrote a scathing condemnation of our willingness to overlook what a horrible sociopath he was just so that he might paint us another pretty picture. A summary: www.theguardian.com. Art and design Jonathan Jones. Blog 2009 June 09. George Orwell. Art critic Salvador Dalí. The original article, www.georgeorwell.org. Benefit of clergy. Some notes on Salvador Dalí. 0.html. About a decade ago I worked with this old guy who claimed to have been friends with Salvador Dalí when he was younger. He said he sometimes hung out with Dalí when he was painting, and Dalí would occasionally convince women to come back to his studio to let him paint them in the nude. Then Dalí and this guy would jerk off to the naked women together. I'm not sure which would be worse, that story being true or an 80-plus-year-old man making up a story about jerking off with Salvador Dalí and telling it to me, a then 25-year-old woman. I bet it was true. Seems like him. There are various accounts, including his own writings, that describe Dalí as being unenthusiastic about sex with both men and women, and his main method of sexual release was masturbation. Apparently he would often host orgies in his home and mostly participate as a spectator. He was said to have a fear of female genitalia, perhaps due to his father showing him photos of people suffering venereal diseases when he was young. And he might have only had sex with his wife once. Apparently he would often host orgies in his home and mostly participate as a spectator. I smell a business model. Travis Scott essentially leaving his manager for dead in the studio. His loyal ex-manager, who suffered from seizures, had one while Travis was with him. Travis abandoned him while it was happening and went home, then texted him firing him a day later saying, "I can't have a manager who's shaking on the ground and shit." The lack of empathy continued with Astro World. As someone married to a man with epilepsy, this makes me so angry. Duck Travis Scott. Seriously, WTF? As someone who just had their first ever seizure in my early 30s, I literally cannot imagine someone doing this. When I woke up from mine, everyone was so panicked and concerned. Even total strangers who just happened to be there when it happened. My husband spent the next week not sleeping because every time I moved in my sleep, he panicked thinking it was happening again. Heaven forbid I knock over a shampoo bottle while in the shower. Hess there knocking on the door asking if I'm okay within 10 seconds. Hess the best, Duck Travis Scott. Robert H. Richards. Richards, who's the heir to the DuPont family's estimated $14 billion, was arrested in 2009 for repeatedly sexually assaulting his 3-year-old daughter. The billionaire offered to take a polygraph test to clear his name, but he failed the exam and eventually confessed to the charges. He should have received a sentence of potentially 30 years in prison, but his lawyers were able to change the charge to 4th-degree rape, and he was given 8 years in prison. However, the court believed he wouldn't fare well in prison, so his sentence was suspended and he was freed on probation. 3 years old. For duck's sake. And no prison sentence because he's a billionaire. Fusige that. He should have rotted and died in prison. Remember, kids. The law only applies. Kids in unison, if you're poor. Curtis Kurt Johnson. The billionaire whose family owned the household products company, SC Johnson, was arrested in March 2011 for molestation. Faced with a potential 40-year sentence for repeatedly assaulting his teenage stepdaughter, the businessman, who was worth an estimated $4.2 billion in 2019, only received 3 months in prison and a fine of $6,000. Alongside the short prison term and the fine that hardly made a dent in his fortune, Johnson also didn't have to register as a sex offender. SC Johnson, a family company. Edit, thank you for all the upvotes, awards, and especially gold. Duck that dude. CeeLo Green. In 2012 he slipped a woman an ecstasy pill without her knowledge and raped her while she was unconscious. She woke up naked in his bed with no memory of what happened. His charges were eventually lowered to a felony of supplying ecstasy. In response to backlash, he tweeted, "People who have really been raped remember. And if someone is passed out, they're not even with you consciously. So with implies consent." Edited because sex with an unconscious person isn't sex, it's rape. Thanks to those of you who pointed out my wording. Oh my ducking God? That last tweet is vile. It doesn't even make sense. She's not with me because she's passed out, so she technically consented because she's with me. What? The only thing I can make of it is that because she couldn't remove consent, she technically consented. Soulja Boy beat a pregnant woman into having a miscarriage. The suit claims that, despite knowing the plaintiff was pregnant at the time, Way became irate and violent during a conversation, and began to punch plaintiff in the face and chest, until she could no longer stand on her feet. After falling to the ground, the suit claims Way continued to kick her all over her body, particularly in the stomach. Not long after, the suit states, the plaintiff suffered a miscarriage and was unable to carry her pregnancy into full term. The suit also claims the plaintiff had to undergo a dilation and curettage procedure to remove her uterine lining after the miscarriage. Oh, that's horrific. My heart broke reading that. That poor woman and baby. Tom Cruise helped the Church of Scientology when they caused the wrongful death of one of their members, Lisa McPherson. Cruise was used to woo politicians in Florida just as the church was being indicted for the abuse committed against Lisa, and later the charges were dropped. He also uses the forced labor population within the church, I think they get like $50 a week, to do things for him like work on his motorcycles. He is well aware of their employment conditions, yet still joins in exploiting them. You mean slave owners want to keep their slaves? Didn't Caitlyn Jenner hit and kill someone with her car? I don't forget about this cause it was a running South Park joke for like 2 years. Buckle up, buckaroo. Floyd Mayweather beat the shit out of his former girlfriend, and got away with it because the judge allowed him to train for a fight he was headlining. Let's not act like there was just one woman he beat the shit out of. He served 60 days for one of the at least 3 women that he has had charges filed for beating up. Chris Brown, how is this guy still getting work and recognition? In this age of cancel culture he is way overdue. John Travolta sexually assaulted several young men, and has seemingly faced no repercussions from this. You'll be receiving calls from the Church of Scientology soon. They don't call, they send people. Last podcast on the left just did a 3-part series on David Miscavige. They all got phone calls. Philip Burke, film industry executive, journalist, and film critic, sexually assaulted Brendan Fraser, and his defense was it was in jest not sexual intent, which then he got off for it. Had any of us used that defense, we would have been buried under the jail. Not only that, but it derailed Fraser's career. I love him, and his resurgence is so long overdue it's not even funny. The fact that any person thinks it's okay to do that kind of thing is disgusting, and Brendan likely won't ever forget that day. Personal connection there. Sexual assault survivor from the U.S. Army. They swept everything on the rug and I was stuck in the same training company as the offender for 3 months. I wanted to kill them every single day of it and derailed my enlistment completely. During the court-martial they made me do an impact statement. The release of personal statements and my depressive and suicidal issues afterwards were held against me my entire career. And I never found out if the offender had to register as a sex offender or not. Back to the main thing, Brendan Fraser and Terry Crews' stories and statements about similar experiences have literally saved my life several times. They were childhood icons and icons still who remind me every day not only am I not to blame, but it's okay not to be okay still. Edit, the overwhelming response and support has meant more than any of you all could ever know. Thank you. I'm right there with you. I was sexually assaulted at my university, and not only did the university fight hard to cover it up, they eventually expelled me in retaliation for filing complaints against them and expressly for reporting and speaking out about what happened to me, forever derailing my academic career. Since then I have worked hard to use what happened to me as an example of what needs to change and try to help others who have had similar experiences. I am sorry for what you have gone through. I know that feeling of injustice well. When I reported mine, the college admin told me that it sounded like a harmless prank and that I must be exaggerating cause guys don't do that to other guys. Jack Nicholson beat a prostitute that he hired to the point of irreversible brain damage. Sheehan claims that Nicholson promptly grabbed her hair, thumped her head on the floor, and then threw her out of his house. Sheehan's lawyer Ira Chester says, about a year after she received the original payment, her injuries and the damage to her brain stem got worse than originally thought. Now the injury is actually killing her. She has no vision at times and finds it hard to cope with the pain. The medical bills have already reached $60,000, but if she is to survive she needs an important operation. The original settlement isn't enough. So he killed her but did it slow enough to get her to sign a settlement agreement with a little money. He has the ethics of a corporation. If she does die from an injury sustained even years before, the authorities can pursue a murder charge. They will, however, need to prove it in court, that her death would have been a direct result of that injury.